Hello everyone, today is 18th of February, now it's 10 past 9 in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for a day in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. And there are quite a few very significant developments and news that I'd like to share with you for this moment. Although before I start, let me notice that this small independent media project is completely subscriber funded, and if you like my work, if you like my channels and want to support, you can do it through several means, with donations through PayPal or Boosty platforms, or by subscribing to my page on Patreon or Boosty, and there you can also support with the crypto. All the links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. That's been said, let me also ask you, dear friends, to click that like button and leave some commentary. This is the only way we can at least try to influence extremely aggressive algorithm. Yesterday and for a long time now we are failing to influence this algorithm, but maybe today, I don't know. So if you can, please click that like button and leave some commentary, share video with your friends, and so let's start with the news update itself now. And first of all, short summary of the situation on Ukrainian battlefield. Yesterday, if you watch my update, you know that I reported about progress of the Russian armed forces in South Donetsk sector of the front line, activization of Russian military operations in this area after some operational pause, since the liberation of Velika and Novoselka settlement. And well, later on yesterday we actually received confirmation from many different sources that Russian troops are entered and established full control over the settlement of Novoselka on the southern western side of Velika and Novoselka settlement. And same time we receive additional confirmation that information that Russian troops cross Mokley-Yali river on the northern western side of Velika and Novoselka, and began offensive operation, local scale offensive operation or cleaning operation in Novocheretovatore settlement. I guess today, maybe tomorrow, this Russian Defense Ministry will confirm information about progress of the Russian armed troops, Russian armed forces in this area also. But this is not all. If you know, dear friends, for the last several days, Kyiv regime's propaganda and Western propaganda was pushing narrative that Kyiv regime forces conducted local-scale counteroffensives and established control over the Pishchana settlement on southern western flank of Pokrovsk city, on outskirts of Pokrovsk, basically. I had some doubts about these reports, and although I reported about this propaganda of the Kyiv regime, and I shared my doubts about truthfulness of these reports. And well, yesterday Russian Telegram channels start publishing videos, by the way, when Russian troops are presented in this industrial part of the village, which according to claims of Ukrainian propaganda was captured by Kyiv regime's troops. So therefore we have official confirmation, that video confirmation, that Pishchana is under full Russian control. And even though there was some attempts of Kyiv regime's garrison in Pokrovsk to launch offensives in Pishchana direction, Russian troops repel all the attacks, destroy a number of armored groups of Kyiv regime, and maintain position in this settlement. So situation, as I said yesterday, is under complete Russian control, and initiative, by the way, is in Russian hands all along the front line. Take any sector, initiative is in Russian hands, and Kyiv regime forces don't even have a slight chances to regain initiative, ever. But to continue, dear friends, we have some very interesting reports about developments in southern flank of Kupiansk sector, where Russian troops as a result of local-scale offensive operation, obliterated defensive positions of Kyiv regime forces in Yampolovka settlement, which is located south of Terny village, which is under Russian control for quite a while now. And the latest reports are that Russian troops actually established full control over their Yampolovka settlement. Significant progress undoubtedly, and I guess it is only a matter of days now, and Russian troops will conduct offensive operation in direction of Myrna and Belogorovka settlements. And this is also not all. Russian Defense Ministry confirmed information about progress of the Russian armed forces on the northern flank of Kupiansk sector. And reports are that Figolevka settlement is under full Russian control on the right bank of the Oskol River. And also Russian Defense Ministry confirmed information that Russian troops establish full control over the settlement of Sverdlikovo, liberated this settlement in Kursk salient area. Sverdlikovo, as you can see, dear friends, is located on the northern western part of this tiny borderline peace Suja district that is temporarily still under occupation of Kyiv regime forces and the NATO mercenaries. Also significant progress, I will say, because Sverdlikovo was playing crucial role as in terms of logistics for Kyiv regime troops in the Kursk salient area. So this invading force gonna have even more hard time in attempts to maintain their presence in that borderline area. And this is it when it comes to short summary of the situation on Ukrainian battlefield. Of course, if you are looking for more detailed information on developments on line of contact in past 12 to 24 hours, I recommend military channels for that. They are providing great volume of that detailed information. That being said, let's go through some other news. And obviously today, one of the top news or is going to be one of the main news for the day will be direct negotiations between Russian and US delegations that will take place in Saudi Arabia. US delegation will be led by head of State Department Marco Rubio and also National Security Advisor of the Trump. And Russian delegation will be led by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the aide of Russian President Yuri Ushakov. Obviously, some other figures, high-ranking officials, and other individuals that can be useful for negotiations will be involved. Also, and before this meeting, Lavrov had a conversation with the journalists. He was asked about a number of topics, and among them EU's role in negotiations when it comes to Ukrainian crisis. And Lavrov said that due to extreme hostility of the European elites of the number of European states, let's say it this way, because not all EU member states are hostile. We have example of Slovakia and Hungary, for example, right? So therefore, Lavrov stated that due to extreme hostility of leadership of number of EU member states and EU bureaucracy itself, Russia don't see EU being invited into negotiations. And he has a point, by the way. He has a point. Russia and US can actually deal with all the issues. EU's presence is definitely not needed, right? And Lavrov was also asked about rumors that start circulating in the Western propaganda that Moscow may agree on some territorial concessions. And Lavrov stated that this is nonsense. This is nonsense. Moscow will not even spend a second on this matter. This is total nonsense. Anybody in the West can talk about any crap. It does not mean that Russia have to take it seriously, right? Negotiations will be on very serious matters. And if it comes to concessions, I'm quite sure it's a US and other Western countries that will have to agree on concessions because of their involvement in this proxy war against Russia. And I'm quite sure US and number of European states will pay tens of billions of dollars as a compensation, potentially more. No matter that information will be disclosed or not, but they will pay big time. That's how it is. But meanwhile, by the way, obviously, Kyiv regime and the EU leadership is not happy to see negotiations between Moscow and Washington, and they will definitely try to derail these talks, derail rapprochement sort of between US and Russia, and unfortunately they have means to do so. First of all, Zelensky stated during his conversation with some media that he will refuse to recognize Russia-US talks. Let's go through this news for a little detail. Kyiv will not recognize any agreements that could be reached between Russia and the US during the talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky told the journalists on Monday Ukrainian government will only acknowledge negotiations that involve Kyiv's representatives, he added. And well, first of all, neither US officials, neither Russian officials ever said that Kyiv regime will not be involved at some point. Obviously, Kyiv regime will be involved, and whoever will have legitimacy there, at least some legitimacy, definitely not Zelensky, but whomever will have any legitimacy will eventually sign up for whatever agreements will be reached, right? So therefore, this is not even a conversation, like presence of Kyiv representatives of the Kyiv regime in the talks. But whole different topic is when these representatives will be needed. Definitely not today. And potentially not in during the second or third round of talks between Washington and Moscow. First of all, I guess the leadership of two countries, Russia and US, will work on a framework of de-escalation. And when some principal agreements are reached between the sides, only then I guess it will make sense to call representatives of Kyiv regime and just inform them about agreements that they're gonna sign up for, because no one is interested in opinion of Kyiv regime, obviously, not in Washington, not in Moscow. It's just too clear, right? And I don't think Trump's administration or administration of Russian president here in Russia has any time to play some games with their representatives of Kyiv regime and to spend some time while talking to them. I mean, there is no need for that, absolutely, right? When needed, they will be called and they will sign whatever papers they will be given. That's about it, right? That's it. But when it comes to Zelensky himself, because this person is definitely not legit, has no legitimacy at all, not at all. Obviously, he have to be replaced, and he knows this. His inner circle knows this, and they will try as much as they can to derail this cooperation between Russia and the US, together with the European elites that are also not happy to be sidelined, right? First of all, UK, obviously, which is in charge of Europe, let's say. Even though UK itself is not a member of the EU, but London is the most powerful when it comes to European capitals in general, right? And therefore, I'm quite sure Kyiv regime, under leadership of Zelensky and their European masters, first of all British masters, will try to derail Russia-US talks with all sorts of provocations, from false flag operations to terrorist attacks. And that's why I think Russian and US secret services have to be constantly in touch, monitor closely situation, and cooperate to minimize whatever threats London, Paris, potentially Berlin, some other capitals, Warsaw, and the Kyiv regime may come up with, and they will come up with plenty of provocations, by the way, 100%, I have no doubts about it, and they already did, and I'll give you in a minute information on that. So yes, it's not just cooperation between politicians of Russia and US, but also cooperation between secret services of two countries have to be activated big time to prevent derailment of this conversation, let's say, that is happening between the two countries. And when it comes to provocative actions of the Kyiv regime and its European backers and the leadership of UK political class and secret services, well, we have this report this morning that tanker in Italian Savoni port experienced explosions, 2 explosions at least, and was damaged at this point. No reports about oil spill. Tanker itself was on the flag of Malta, and crew is safe. No casualties were reported, but you remember, dear friends, lately there was quite a number of incidents with their different vessels, isn't it? All those vessels were one way or another connected with Russia, and I would not be surprised at all if this vessel, this tanker, was also connected with Russia one way or another. Maybe this tanker was sometime in the past in Russian waters, but whatever the case, I'm quite sure if investigation is conducted objectively, I'm quite sure investigators will find out that there is a trace of Zelensky's terrorist regime in these attacks, and so I guess already now European and US elites, or the elites in the collective West, have good enough reasoning, by the way, to think about what kind of monsters they were breeding in this so-called Ukraine. Monsters that are already biting their own masters, their own Western masters. And this is not only the news about terrorist activity of the Kyiv regime. Look at this news, dear friends. Ukrainian drones attack US-linked energy infrastructure on Russian territory, but energy infrastructure where US energy giants have a huge share, right? And I think this attack definitely is yet another example that these monsters that were bred by the West in this so-called Ukraine are now biting back on their masters. Let's go through this news. And this is just the beginning, by the way. You know, European states of North America only beginning to experience Ukrainian terrorism. Several drones have attacked a major oil pumping station in southern Russia. Their facilities, a US-linked operator, CPC, has claimed. The incident took place aimed the wider reported drone barrage involving some 20 drones which attacked Russia's Krasnodar region yesterday, by the way. So according to Russian Ministry of Defense, press release from Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC, a conglomerate involving US giants Chevron and ExxonMobil. I mean, quite serious players on field of energy, isn't it? The attack on the Kropotkinskaya pumping station was carried out in the early hours of Monday by drones filled with explosives and metal elements. CPC is one of the largest international oil transportation projects in the Commonwealth of Independent States. CIC, by the way, Commonwealth of Independent States, is an organization created by former Soviet republics. So CPC is one of the largest international oil transportation project in the Commonwealth of Independent States with the participation of Russia, Kazakhstan, and the consortium of leading oil companies, including the US giants. The pipeline system mainly collects crude from large oil fields in the West Kazakhstan, as well as from Russia. In 2024, US companies controlled some 40% of oil supplies shipped via CPC. Overall, last year, a total of 62.4 million tons of oil were transported via the pipeline, via the CPC, with 7.3 million tons or 11.7% originating from Russia and 55.1 million tons or 88.3% from Kazakhstan, according to data. So Kyiv regime, by the way, with I'm quite sure with active support of British Secret Services, conducted terrorist attack on US interests, first of all, because some 40% of this CPC, this consortium, by the way, belongs to ExxonMobil and Chevron, right? And also this attack was against Kazakhstan because 88% of oil that was transported through this pipeline network was originated in the Kazakhstan, right? So that's a clear example of Ukrainian terrorism directed against not just Russia but other countries also, including major supporter of this so-called Ukraine for the last 3 years, US. And that's why I'm saying, dear friends, collective West is about to find out what kind of monsters they were breeding in this so-called Ukraine. Ukrainian terrorism has just begun. Let's continue with some more news. And when it comes to Ukrainian terrorism, when Zelensky, leader of this terrorist enterprise, is visiting today Turkey to have a meeting with another terrorist, Erdogan, with head of another terrorist regime there in Turkey. And one should keep in mind, by the way, that Erdogan's regime is quite tight with the UK, with London and British Secret Services and militaries. Some people may think, Turkey is under US control or something, but no. In reality, UK always had a huge influence over Turkey and still has. And now, which country is leading the charge against US, against peace in Ukraine, against Russia? London, right? It's UK, by the way. UK's political class, UK's secret services. And it is not at all random stuff that this terrorist Zelensky is visiting Turkey now to meet with another terrorist, Erdogan. And they will probably discuss terrorist activity, sabotage activity that they could come up with against Russia, against US interests to somehow derail potential cooperation between Washington and Moscow to resolve Ukrainian crisis. And so yet again, Moscow and Washington, secret services of Russia and the US, have every reason to intensify talks, to intensify exchange of information, to minimize all the threats that will be generated in upcoming days and weeks and potentially months by all these terrorists and extremists that are in charge of formerly Ukraine, Turkey, European states like UK, France, Germany, you name it, right? Let's continue. And Kommersant newspaper is reporting that there was a quite interesting article in Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post, according to which, if asked, China may actually deploy its peacekeepers on a line of demarcation. Let's see, once some final agreements are reached about the escalation of their Ukrainian crisis, which is quite interesting. Well, Chinese militaries are participating in some peacekeeping operations worldwide, and they do have some experience. I don't think Russia will have a huge issue with deployment of Chinese troops on a line of demarcation. Only question is where this line of demarcation will be. If this line of demarcation is on a border of Western Ukraine, I guess Moscow will be okay with that, because rest of the Ukraine, in territory of rest of Ukraine, there will be no peacekeepers or no foreign troops, by the way. Just because rest of the territory is going to be either part of Russia or in Russian influence. In zone of Russian influence. That's it. When it comes to current administrative border between Western Ukraine and the rest of the this so-called Ukraine. Okay, on that line, we might see some peacekeepers from different countries. It might be China, it might be India, Brazil, I don't know. BRICS member states definitely can send a peacekeeping contingent, for sure. But in no circumstances, Russia will tolerate presence of the NATO troops outside of Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine, different story. If there is some sort of agreement between Moscow and the European capitals, then Moscow may tolerate presence of NATO troops into Western Ukraine, but rest is out of conversation. And if in attempt to derail final resolution of the Ukrainian crisis, UK and there are some EU member states, let's say France, will send their troops into Ukraine under disguised as a sort of peacekeepers, like they may call it a EU peacekeeping mission or whatever. Well, these troops will be legit target for Russia. Without Russia's agreement, there can be no troop deployments anywhere in the so-called Ukraine. West of Ukraine or not, anywhere. And Russia will only tolerate presence of foreign troops in Western Ukraine if negotiations are held on that matter. But rest of the Ukraine definitely is out of question. But because we have these reports, by the way, excuse me. What the hell, man? Sorry, dear friends. I mean, this cold, man. I'm still dealing with it. So we have this reporter from RIA Novosti that there was an article in Washington Post according to which European states, UK, France, some others are planning to send some 25 to 30,000 troops into Ukraine. Well, yet again, as I already said, if these troops will be stationed in Western Ukraine, and if Moscow is informed about it, if some talks were held about presence of these troops in the Western Ukraine, okay, that's a whole different story. But if Moscow is not even informed, if Moscow didn't agree on deployment of these troops, then obviously Russian side will see presence of these NATO troops, and no matter how they're gonna be disguised, European peacekeeping mission or whatever, obviously Russia will see them as a hostile and will take action. And maybe, by the way, maybe that's exactly what London and Paris wants. Maybe they will come up with some EU peacekeeping mission. Although we all know, by the way, whenever peacekeepers are deployed in any part of this world, mandate has to come from UN. Only UN can give you mandate for peacekeeping troop deployment. Without UN mandate, any presence of foreign troops in zone of military operations can be seen and should be seen as a hostile, and therefore we might face a situation when London, Paris, some other capitals in Europe that are extremely anti-Russian might come up with this idea of European peacekeeping mission. They might sacrifice hundreds and potentially thousands of their troops, send them into Ukraine without UN mandate, provoke military confrontation with Russia, and when these troops will be obliterated, these troops of European states, then very same capitals, London, Paris, and so on, will call for fifth article of NATO to be enforced. And maybe that's how they will try to derail a rapprochement between Russia and US, talks between Russia and the US, and final resolution of the Ukrainian crisis. This is a risk, by the way. This is a risk. We all know that Western countries, European countries, are led by total psychopaths, right? Extreme Russophobes and the psychopaths, and they are capable of any sort of provocation. And they might really deploy British troops, French troops on the line of contact in Ukraine. These troops to be hit then by Russian forces, so that Paris, London, and some other capitals will start crying about it and calling for this fifth article to be invoked. Maybe that's what their plan is. While simultaneously they might come up with some, false flag operations, terrorist attacks, and so on, to additionally force US to break out of these talks with Russia and go back to previous position when US was a main driving force of this proxy war against Russia during the Biden's administration, for example. Anyways, we will find out. But Moscow and Washington, if Washington is really serious about de-escalating, if forces that are behind Trump's administration are serious about ending hostility with Russia, while realizing that the longer this hostility continues, weaker and weaker US is becoming, then, well, Washington and Moscow have to cooperate. Secret services of two countries have to cooperate and work together to neutralize whatever threats will be generated in upcoming days, weeks, and months by terrorist regime in Kyiv and terrorist regimes in France, UK, and Poland, and so on. Right? Let's continue with some more news. TASS news agency is reporting that, yesterday's emergency meeting in Paris, by the way, in capital of France, that was called by Macron, turned out to be quite a failure, expectedly, at least for me. Number of leaders of European states get together. To be more precise, leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, Netherlands, Denmark, and UK, and they were discussing exactly means to derail talks between Russia and US, to delay final resolution of Ukrainian crisis. They were discussing possibilities how to escalate further with Russia, including troop deployments. And according to reports, sides were unable to reach final agreements. Some countries were for troop deployments, for example, UK and France, calling for it. I believe if asked, Baltic states will be all for it. Norway and some other, Denmark and some other Baltic states will be also for it. But other countries are not that keen to end up in direct war with Russia, and therefore these countries that are led mainly by extreme Russophobes, by the way, were unable to come up with any agreement at all. So it was a total failure and clown show in Paris, but they're not gonna stop, by the way. They're not gonna stop. London and Paris, together with Warsaw, with Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, potentially with the involvement of Finland, Norway, who knows, maybe even Sweden, by the way. Well, they will try to come up with all sorts of provocations to somehow delay final resolution of Ukrainian crisis and to break talks between Russia and the US. And by the way, same time, meanwhile, we have a report, interesting report from Financial Times, and RIA Novosti pay attention to it, that US might actually withdraw its troops from Baltic states. Interesting. Let's translate this for a little more detail. I mean, if European elites act too crazy, they really might force Trump's administration to retaliate. And US definitely has means to retaliate. And all sorts of means, by the way. So President Donald Trump may withdraw US military from Baltic states and Western Europe aimed talks with Russia over the Ukraine conflict. Financial Times columnist Gideon Rahman said, citing unnamed officials. So yes, one of the ways to retaliate against provocative actions of their European elites can be withdrawal of US troops from certain areas, although I don't think US will consider complete withdrawal of its forces, because it's occupation force, by the way. You know, US don't want to pay for European states, but same time, I guess US would like to maintain some sort of leverage over the European states, including US occupation forces to stay in Europe. And that's what it is really, but it's occupation force, especially when it comes to Italy and Germany, right? It is occupation force. So, you know, US might withdraw some troops from certain areas, from Baltics, for example, because, I mean, who cares about Baltics, by the way? Russia don't cares about Baltics, I mean, this Chihuahua, Estonia, Litva, Latvia. US don't cares about them. No one cares, by the way. And one of the areas where provocations might take place is exactly the Baltics, because leadership of these Chihuahua states are so extreme Russophobes, by the way. They might sacrifice everybody in their own countries, all citizens or their fellow citizens, in attempt to harm Russia at least a little bit. So yet again, it is immensely important for Russian and US secret services to cooperate to minimize all the threats that these psychopaths that are in charge of majority of European states may come up with, you know, all the risks to be neutralized. And meanwhile, dear friends, we have this report that bunch of companies, by the way, bunch of companies from Collective West are now queuing in to come back to Russian market. I'm not happy about it, really. If it was up to me, I will never allow back any Western company or any company from Collective West that leave Russia and betray Russian customers, right? I will never ever allow these companies to come back on Russian market. But it's not up to me. Decision is on Russian government, and I don't know what they will decide. But dozens and dozens of companies, by the way, big names, small names, plenty of them, now queuing in to come back to Russia. because they lost tens and hundreds of billions, by the way, while fleeing this quite lucrative market, isn't it? And among them, those companies are Visa and the MasterCard. And I'm paying attention to these companies specifically because only way Visa and MasterCard can come back on Russian market, if they are allowed to, is if Russian banks are again in SWIFT. As you know, by the way, there is almost no bank left here in Russia that is still connected with the SWIFT. And SWIFT is, of course, this European-based, I believe, system of exchange of information between the banks, right? All the transactions and that kind of stuff is going now through SWIFT system. And obviously, Visa and MasterCard are also operating through this SWIFT system, right? With the banks that are part of SWIFT. And because Visa and MasterCard wants to come back on Russian market, maybe they know something. Maybe they know that Trump's administration is planning to lift some sanctions, including sanctions that force SWIFT to cut off Russian banks. Well, in one hand, okay, it will make easier for business to, cooperate with the foreign partners if Russian banks are back to SWIFT. But I'm not quite happy with that, by the way. I don't want Russian banks to go back to SWIFT. I don't want MasterCard and Visa card to be allowed in Russia. I want BRICS member states to create alternative financial and banking system, alternative payment systems. That's what I want. That's what world needs, right? Because SWIFT is weaponized. All these Western financial and banking systems are weaponized and cannot be trusted. And therefore, even if it was up to me, even if US or whomever, whichever side in the West will say, let's lift these sanctions and allow Russian banks into SWIFT again and that kind of stuff. Moscow should say, you know what? No, thanks. We are good. We don't need you. That's what Russian position should be, man. So no Visa, no MasterCard in Russia. Fuck them all. No companies to be allowed back in Russia that betray Russian customers. None of them. That should be principal position of Moscow, man. Because they cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted. And when it comes to Western financial and banking system, you know what? No thanks. Stay away from us. That should be a position, by the way. Russia did manage to overcome whatever obstacles West was creating, including to Russian financial and the banking system, and we will continue to do so. And we will become better and better and better in it, right? And BRICS should come up with their alternative financial and the banking system. And as far as I know, dear friends, according to some reports in open sources here in Russia, one of the main topics of discussion during upcoming BRICS summit that will take place in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, will be exactly the topic of payment systems. Right? So, I know I did spoke about this topic for so long. I was hoping that during the Kazan BRICS summit we will hear some good news about creation of this alternative financial and the banking system, but maybe I was too optimistic. Okay. But now we are receiving reports that this will be main topic of discussion during the summit in Rio. So hopefully in year or 2 or 3 years time or 5 years time, whatever it takes or how long will it take, but hopefully BRICS will come up with alternative financial and the banking system, and companies worldwide, including from the West, will join this alternative system and will do business with their Russian partners, Chinese partners, Indian partners, or partners from whatever country in this world freely, right? Without being afraid that some psychopaths in Washington or Brussels or London or Paris is going to sanction them for that, right? So you know, maybe, and when it comes to these companies that betray Russian customers and flee Russia under orders of political class in the West, those companies should never ever be allowed to work on Russian market, by the way. Never. I hope Russian leadership will have a similar position. I hope so. We don't need them, man. I don't need Visa and MasterCard, right? I don't need to wear, I don't know, man. I don't need to eat in McDonald's, by the way. If it comes to fast food, we have alternatives here, right? That are better. That are better, you know? I don't need to see German cars, by the way, on Russian streets. Chinese cars do the job quite well, right? I don't need German cars to see here, or British cars, or Italian cars. I don't need that. We can survive without it, right? I don't need to wear some Adidas t-shirt. I can wear t-shirt that is made here in Russia, right? We have everything we need. So all the companies from the West that flee Russia, betray Russian customers, should be banned to operate in Russia forever. I hope this is going to be principal position of Moscow. I'm afraid some leaders of Russian economy have a different approach. They want to do, business as usual because they think, they had no choice. They were under pressure. I don't give a damn, man. They portray Russia. They portray Russian customers. They should not be forgiven ever. But anyways, let's continue. That's the situation. I'm sharing this news just to let you know, dear friends, that even though Western propaganda is pushing narrative that Russian economy is destroyed and it's in tatters and people are queuing in to buy bread and people are starving to death, despite all this crazy propaganda that you may hear in the West from the Western so-called media, in reality Russian economy is doing quite okay, and dozens of these big names in the Western business are queuing in to come into this market to make some billions and billions and billions that they lost due to their betrayal of Russian customers. That's what's happening, man. Anyways, let's continue. TASS news agency is reporting that IDF, Israel Defense Force, made decision to maintain at least 5 positions in southern Lebanon, although from all the other areas they are planning to withdraw its forces. I don't know if Lebanese side will be okay with that or not, but seems like Israel will maintain, will occupy certain areas in southern Lebanon indefinitely. TASS news agency is also reporting that Rosoboron export order portfolio exceeds $60 billion. Rosoboron export is, of course, a Russian state-run corporation that is doing business on world weapons market, and the portfolio is 60 billion, which is quite impressive, isn't it? Quite impressive. So Russian military-industrial complex is providing not just Russian armed forces with all the necessary weapons and munition and stuff, but also simultaneously is continue to sell weapons on the world market to deliver weapons to its customers. TASS news agency is also reporting that Russia and UAE, United Arab Emirates, signed agreement to eliminate double taxation, according to Russian Finance Ministry. Well, great news. Relationships between Russia and United Arab Emirates are good, including economical relationships. UAE is a BRICS member state, and whatever steps are made to make business for companies of these countries, easier is good. So great news, by the way, there about further intensification of the cooperation between Russia and the United Arab Emirates. RT is also reporting that EU gas imports from Russia is soaring again. So Russian gas purchases by EU member states jumped to nearly 2 billion euros in the final month of the last year, the highest point since early 2023, TASS reported on Monday, citing Eurostat data. The surge occurred ahead of Kyiv's suspension of the pipeline gas transit through Ukraine to the bloc. So in December, by the way, last year, Russia was number one supplier of gas to EU. More than 25% of gas that EU imported came from Russia. Despite all these statements, of these Russophobe criminals that are in charge of number of European states, that they do not need no cooperation with Russia, and their economies are doing okay and well, and even better than ever before. In reality, by the way, European economies are in deeper trouble, and they just need, European economies need cooperation with Russia. It's just too obvious, but due to crazy policies of their EU leaders, these economies in Europe are struggling and will continue to struggle. Although Russia, as you can see, dear friends, Russia has no issue to cooperate. Russia is open for cooperation still. Maybe many citizens here in Russia, including myself, are not happy that Russia is still supplying hostile states in Europe with energy. But decision-making process is not dependent on our take, right? In any ways, Russia is open clearly for cooperation, but Europe is not. And okay, if they don't want to, then let them bear the consequences. That's what I can say about it. And this is it for now, dear friends. Hopefully you will find this update informative, interesting, and useful. If so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything, or maybe somehow, some miracle will happen, and today we will manage to influence algorithm with likes and comments. If you can, please share information about my channels or videos of mine with your friends. And finally, if you like my work and if you want to support, you can do it through several means. All the links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. Have a wonderful day and take care.